Massive news in the music industry, and Universal have just struck a deal with Even. Yes, it's finally happened. They've announced a major new global deal, multi-year deal with the D2C platform Even. And it could really start to reshape how artists on the major label are going to directly sell to their fans in future for their future campaigns. So, forget streaming only for now. Forget streaming first for now. What if artists start selling their music and merch directly to their biggest supporters before it goes on streaming platforms? Now, we've already spoken about this multiple times. We've already spoke about it with the Russell campaign. Did a whole video on that. Done a couple of other mentions about this topic as well in some of the videos that we've already done in the past few weeks. But this is really a game changer, and I think the key thing here is noting that not only is it about selling music and merch directly to fans initially, but it's also about allowing those sales to be chart eligible. Now, we did a video on Taylor Swift last week and YouTube and Billboard, and how supposedly her decision to premiere her music video Opalite on Spotify and Apple Music before YouTube, 2 days before, was heavily driven to the fact that YouTube is going to start taking its data out of Luminate, out of Billboard, so those views, that consumption on the platform won't count toward the Billboard chart. So why would you want to throw all those views away and not have them count for the chart, right? This is something that Even have already looked at and addressed and are beginning to unlock for artists, and now clearly for Universal. So what is Even? Well, we know Even, right? We've seen Even. We have been following them for a long time. I was personally an ambassador for them. I had a couple of artists sign up through my ambassadorship to Even. We've been in contact with Even, and they are basically a direct-to-fan platform, a direct-to-fan commerce and engagement platform. And it's basically built to help artists sell products, sell experiences, sell merch, sell access, exclusive content straight to their supporters before streaming, or while counting toward the official sales chart. And I think it's been, there's been a lot of, initially there was a lot of confusion. I've spoke about this already, but with Even, the whole concept was that we can work in conjunction with the labels. It's not about replacing record labels. It's about maneuvering and rejigging campaigns and how we could actually work in tandem with record labels. And so the idea is that you monetize the superfan first, because they can't wait. They need access, so they're going to pay for access to your music before it goes public on streaming platforms, right? So why not monetize that process? Why not allow for you to be able to make the most of that from a campaign perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective? Why not make the most of that yearning and that desire for your super fans to get access to your music, to your stuff, right? So that's where Even came in. And now obviously I think it's, we'll talk about this process in general, and how, a lot of people are saying, well, this is, basically essentially history repeating itself, because that's what happened back in the day. Like, you bought records, you Bandcamp and all that stuff, but it's happening with Even. They've signed this deal with Universal now, and we'll put it up on the screen here, and it's reported in Music Business Worldwide today. Universal Music strikes deal with superfan platform Even to power D2C sales for artists worldwide. So, Universal has struck a new multi-year agreement with Even, a superfan-focused platform that lets artists sell music and engage with fans directly. The deal establishes Even as a direct-to-fan resource for UMG, providing the major labels and artists with turnkey tools for engaging superfans through early access to music, exclusive content, and community features. So that's where we're at with the deal so far. I think we've spoken about Even enough, and I think we all sort of know what Even are, who they are, what they do, what they represent, and again, essentially a big idea. The big idea behind this, as well as the whole access thing, is also the fact that it's a global activation. It's a global company. They accept over 140 different currencies. They're reporting their sales to the Billboard, and it's already being used by artists and labels around the world, right? So we'll continue on with the article here, but it says this agreement will allow UMG artists to offer physical music and merchandise through Even using UMG's global D2C vinyl and merch infrastructure. So now this is a really interesting point as well, right? Because essentially with UMG signing this deal with Even, because you know, artists under UMG are now able to use the platform as part of their official playbook release, right? And so it's like they are actually embracing this idea of we don't have to appease the streaming platforms first. Like, you know, you remember like back when Drake did an exclusive Apple Music deal for, I think it might have been for Views, and the album went on Apple Music first. I don't know, I can't remember the exclusivity window. I can't remember the exact details of it all. But the idea was that, you know, we're appeasing streaming platforms to the point that we actually are having them compete and we're actually giving them exclusive content. I think it looks like that the majors are coming round to the idea that, you know, we've already reported on streaming platforms becoming saturated in certain markets. The growth is slowing, and they're looking for other avenues to ensure that they can continue their monetization, to ensure that they can keep the lights on, they can keep making money from music and everything that surrounds it. And so, you know, the fact that they've started to embrace this idea that we can actually sell the music before we put it onto streaming platforms is a positive sign, I would say, for the industry. It's what we want to see. It's what's required in order for, you know, the music industry to move forward and evolve into its next iteration. Otherwise end up in a state that it was in pre-Spotify, you know, Napster era. And so, you know, it is important. I think the other thing to note here as well on the article is that UMG have already made acquisitions and pathways into this idea of super fandom, into this idea of establishing direct to fan access, direct to fan platforms, and accelerating those efforts, right? So it said here that CEO and Chairman Sir Lucian Grange sent an annual memo to staff in which identified superfan monetization as a strategic priority for 2026. In 2026, we will accelerate these efforts both by working with our established DSP partners on the launch of enhanced premium tiers for superfans, as well as by working with emerging platforms that are focused on special events and products for superfans, both virtually and in the physical world. For the Even partnership announced with UMG today extends the DC platform's reach significantly. So, you know, this is obviously a benefit for the artists that are on Universal. And it's not the first, actually. It's not the first, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But, you know, from Even standpoint as well, Even have already grown significantly over the last couple of years. They already have over 500,000 artists through direct sign-ups and distribution partnerships. You know, working with the industry, giving artists and labels and management companies access to their platform, to their technology, to their ability to enable campaigns to be structured this way going forward, right? So, you know, it's really impressive. Even itself, you know, they have various offerings. They have their sort of consumer-facing discovery platform, which is what they're calling Even Marketplace. And Even Marketplace is also the alternative to that is the white label solution, Even Studio, which basically says it is able to transform an artist's website into a dedicated superfan destination, is the quote here that we're reading. Now, we've actually seen this already with Universal, and it's with a big artist, and that big artist is J. Cole. So, you know, we've talked about LaRussell, but J. Cole has also been utilizing Even for actually the whole of this Fallout campaign, the Fall Off campaign. And it actually started maybe over a year ago now when J. Cole released his podcast, which we've actually already talked about, but we'll go to the website anyway. So initially the website was actually the destination for his podcast, which you could buy access to. It was 10 episodes. Some of the episodes were over 2 hours long. I think it might have been called Inevitable, something like that. And basically, that was powered by Even. That whole process was powered by Even. The idea that you can just pay to access the podcast episodes. You know, they're not on Spotify, they're not on YouTube, they're nowhere else to be consumed. They're only on here, and you can't download them even. You have to log in every time you want to. I found that process a little bit jarring, but every time you wanted to listen to it, you had to log in, right? And so that's kind of where it started. And then we had the birthday blizzard, the announcement of the Fall Off album. All of that was done through Even. Access, preliminary access was initially done through Even. And as you can see here on the website, they've got the digital, they've got the physical access as well, which you can purchase or order. And then they've also added the tour there. So essentially it is, I guess it's just technically a website, right? That you can, you don't need to see my details there. I'll have to cut that out of the video. But basically, you know, it's being used by J. Cole and his team, who, you know, are utilizing the power of direct-to-fan campaigning, direct-to-fan structuring. And I think they also did it for the 10th anniversary of 2014 Forest Hills Drive a couple of years ago now. Now, the anniversary rollout really revived the album's chart life, and it actually sent 2014 Forest Hills Drive back into the Billboard Top 15, 10 years later, which is a huge metric for catalog monetization, catalog discovery even. And so that was a huge point of championing for the platform. That was a really huge success story for the platform. And they've used it again, right? They've used it for the Fall Off, and to incredible success, shall we say. So here's something that I wanted to discuss as well, was essentially the success of J. Cole's album, right? So the Fall Off dropped just over a week ago now, and it debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 in the US, which is obviously, you know, incredible feat on its own. But what's even more impressive is that the first week numbers are now very much hip-hop conversation first week numbers, but, you know, not something that we typically talk too much about nowadays. The Fall Off did 280,000 equivalent album units in its first week, which is, first of all, an insane number. Like, not many artists are doing those sort of numbers nowadays anyway, in the first week, let alone, you know, previously either. Like, this is still a huge number of albums in the first week, right? Now, the breakdown also is very interesting. So this included, so it says here, 280,000 equivalent album units earned in the latest tracking week. Stream equivalent album units comprise 166,500. Album sales comprise of 113,000. And track equivalent units comprise of 500. So there was 113,000 album sales, physical album sales or digital album sales. And it says here of that 113,000, 71%, or about 80,000 of the first week sales were vinyl purchases. Now that's a huge amount of vinyls, especially for a hip hop artist, right? And I think it clarifies that point that J. Cole's biggest week ever on vinyl and the largest sales week for any R&B hip hop album on vinyl in a year. The last largest sales week for R&B hip hop vinyl album was Kendrick Lamar, who did 87,000 copies. So he's pretty much on par with Kendrick when it comes to physical, vinyl sales for their album. So this is, this is a bit of a segue here, but essentially, we're talking about the success of this album and it's utilizing this platform even. Granted, J. Cole's already said that, yes, it's going through Universal. It's a distribution deal, his album. It's not Universal don't own the masters. It's J. Cole. He owns the masters. It's being distributed through Universal. And why wouldn't you tap into that infrastructure if you had access to it, right? Like, if you can do a lot of things on your own, you can. But at the same time, he's been with that label and Sony for a while. I don't know his exact setup and whatnot, but it really makes sense to tap into that distribution network. And now it seems like, once the success of this campaign was sort of verified, Universal have now announced a deal with Even, and now a bunch of their artists are probably going to start doing a similar thing. And I haven't really checked J. Cole's streaming numbers, but I could assume that it's probably streamed very well as well. And so this is the case in point that you can actually service your super fans before it goes out to the wider public on streaming platforms. And, you know, the DSPs probably beyond getting upset now. That conversation is probably done because of where it's headed, you know, in the marketplace, as we've discussed on this channel previously. And then the artists and the fans are happy as well. So, you know, I think it's a bit of a win-win. I think it's a positive step, in my opinion. And I'm glad to see that Universal are taking these steps to sort of move into this space and to service their artists in this space. I think it's a really important step for them. And why does it matter? To me, it matters because, you know, the industry for a very long time has been driven now by streaming, and you know, there's been a lot of appeasing to streaming platforms. There's been a lot of you know, parity required on platforms. You know, a lot of work gone into streaming, a lot of optimization. You know, and the truth is, compared to selling 80 odd thousand copies of vinyl directly with maybe a slight, you know, service fee or distribution fee or whatever it is that, you know, these platforms are taking, streaming pays significantly lower and slower, right? Like, from a marketing, from a business, from a campaign perspective, you're going to break even and make profit a hell of a lot more quicker servicing superfans before relying on streaming, you know. And so this basically is flipping the script, and it's basically we're going back in time. Like we're starting to service fans again. It's becoming direct about monetization with fans again. It's directly with the communities again. And I've been speaking about this for several years, and I truly believe it is where it's going to end up headed properly. And I think this is a huge step in that story. You know, the fact that the biggest music company in the world has actually embraced Even. And I feel like it might have been a little bit hostile toward them. I don't know the exact ins and outs of things, but I think as with a lot of technological advances and a lot of just advances in general, giants typically are a little bit not afraid but apprehensive of you know, engaging with and embedding them into their systems and into their operations. That's why I feel like this is a huge step, not only for the industry but also for artists, that will begin to mirror this campaign structure and hopefully enable a lot more independent artists to actually make money from their music, you know, without screaming out for Spotify to pay them more money. So it's a huge deal. I think, like I said, it's gonna head more and more to this sort of this setup in future. And like Universal say in this article, you know, it's very much where they're focusing their energies on as well, like monetizing super fans, and the fact that, as it says here from Even, the foundation of sustainable artist careers. Even exists to support artists and labels at every single stage by giving them the infrastructure to own their fan relationships. So if you are an artist, if you are a manager, if you're a label, this deal is truly an indicator. I believe, you know, direct fan engagement, direct fan monetization, community monetization are no longer experimental tools. I think they're actually now a fundamental part of any campaign, any music campaign. And I think that, you know, we are going to see more and more of this. It's going to become the norm. You know, it's going to become how you roll out albums. And to me, it makes total sense. It's not a trend anymore. I think it's a complete shift, and this is what's going to happen. And we've seen it with some of the biggest artists in the world already. So why not? Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment if you got any ideas or any thoughts on this story. If you've been following it even for a while, what you thought of the J. Cole rollout, his use of the platform. And I'd love to hear what you guys think. Appreciate all your support as always. Please drop a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Peace.